Today we have an amazing presenter for you. Over 11 years ago, Kim Brazwell started KiMISTRY. She has been a social change and trauma-informed consultant for more than 20 years. Today she's going to be talking about social mapping. I will include her bio in the Zoom information and Facebook information so you can read at length, but we want to start without further ado, the incredible Kimberly Brazwell. All right, hey friends who are present either in person or in the interwebs of the world, thank you for being here. So what we're going to be talking about today in this hour is figuring out, like, how does my story connect? How does my story matter, right? And I'm going to be checking out you two, right? Right, so we have these lives that we live. Sometimes we've been through these different kinds of experiences, right? And we know that they may or may not be connected, but it feels like the experience is bigger than just me. It has to mean more than just this thing that happened, right? And not just that my experience links to my story, the people around me, but is there a relationship to my story and the community? So what we're going to do today is do some purpose mapping, which will also show us some power building in our neighborhoods, in our networks, in our communities, and realizing that the lives we have, the stories that we have are bigger than us and are sources for us to link our pain to our passions and to our purposes. So we are going to, I'm like, what is my next screen? I want to see it popping up. Hold please. Oh, this might be a good time for me to tell you this, if you're watching out there or if you're watching here. If you have a blank piece of paper, it would be super awesome because we want to actually write this out. So here's the deal. I'm going to give you 10 questions that we're going to examine together. And in these 10 questions, I actually want us to sit still and sincerely think about your answers to these questions, right? So if you can, if you decide to do it, I'm going to actually show this to you in a way that is true. Want me to stop?
Yeah, give me 1 second. We're not getting audio for some reason. I'm not sure what's going down.
Y'all can cheat in person and get your papers. Let me try again. Testing, 1, 2, testing, testing. Can you hear the sound of my voice? One, two, three, four. We're good? Yes? Okay, friends. Okay, so we're good. All right, so I'm not sure the last thing that you heard, but I'm going to back up a little bit to say this. If you are able to, I would love for you to have something to write with. So I see my friends in person have a piece of paper or something.
I'm going to give you 10 questions that we're going to process. And these 10 questions are going to help us think about our stories, but in a much more mindful way, and in a way that helps us think about community, helps us think about justice. So I'm going to, in giving you these 10 questions, give you two choices. You can either, typically, you know, we just are taking notes down, so if you're having a 1 through 10 and you're just writing your responses, you can do it that way. Or the sneak thing that I wanted to also get in here is to show you this thing called visual practitioning. Some people call it graphic recording, some people call it mind mapping. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a way to almost kind of draw out your story. And hopefully after we're done, I encourage you to hold on to the piece of paper, because there's going to be patterns inside of your stories that you're going to see. And I would love for you to keep digging into this mapping that we're about to do. So if you decide, those of you in person and out there being brave, who would like to maybe venture into this graphic recording space, instead of having the paper long ways, I would ask you to hold it horizontal, landscape, right? So that's where we're going to start. And the first question, we can go ahead to the next one, is when you're seeing the screen, I want you to think about the screen as like a piece of paper. And you see the first circle in the middle. Right in the middle of the paper is our first question. And this question is asking us to think about some of the challenges that we've experienced. So I don't want you to take up the whole paper, but just the middle portion of the paper. And in that circle, write down some of the greatest challenges that you faced. Things that when you think about this stuff, you think, I beat that. Hey, beloved. You say, I beat that thing, right? I went through that and I conquered it. That's what I want you to think about in that first circle. So it might be a divorce. Maybe you experienced poverty growing up. Maybe you experienced assault. Maybe you experienced a parent that was missing, a death. Maybe you experienced incarceration. What might have been something that you've experienced in your life to present that you're like, that was really challenging, and this is a significant part of my story. That's what goes in that first circle, right in the middle, right in the center of our story, right? So like for me, I know I grew up in poverty, and we stayed there for a perpetually long time. So that would be one of the things. Maybe you only have 2 things in your circle. Maybe you got 20 things in your circle. It only belongs to you. Nobody's eavesdropping on your story. It is how you tell it. And what's also significant about this is for you to be centered as your storyteller. You're the storyteller for your story, right? Nobody tells the story but you. So this is the first thing. One of the most significant parts of your story. What have you survived? What challenges have you faced in the circle? The next question is, go ahead and, yeah, oh, you're good, thank you, is what are the greatest wins? So to the left of that circle, if you are thinking about geographic shapes, you can put a rectangle if you like, but I want you to think about the greatest wins, not just the struggle, but in this box, we're gonna be thinking about what is something that I've achieved, this win that I did. Did you get that degree? Did you buy that house? Did you successfully get those kids graduated? Did you recover from that illness? Did you heal from whatever those processes were? What is that thing that you actually found some wins with, those achievements, those victories that you had? We have to also make sure that they're significant in our stories. And there's a reason why we're going to pull on those in a second. So we started out with the challenges. The next thing are the greatest wins that we've had. All right. So then the next one is the battle. So we talked about the significant challenges that we've had. We started with that story in the center. Then we went to the wins that we've had. The next thing that we're going to think about are what's coming, right? It's always something coming. You know, you're just like, I made it through all that stuff, and here comes the next thing. Are you thinking about enrolling in school? Is there that job you need to get? Is there a conversation you need to have? A relationship you need to repair? A move you're gonna do? Some damage control in some area? What is the thing that's next? You know that this battle is coming up, This is on the agenda. You can't really avoid it. It's in sight. What's coming? What's next? The next maybe 4 or 5 questions that I'm going to give us are really going to be thinking about the human beings in our lives, okay? And I really want us to take a minute to kind of take inventory of all of the people and all of the different circumstances and experiences and situations that you've been in. Some of them have been people who added to, some of them have been people who may have detracted from, and then we might have some people who, they were just there. We know those people that's like, you just here, all right, in the peanut gallery. Thank you for coming. God bless and good night. So that's fine. So we want to think about them. So here's the first question. Who are the people who are just showing up in your story? And I'm going to give you 3 different lenses for this, especially as we think about who shows up for us and then how we show up in community, okay? So we've got just, our friends and our family. We've got those folks, right? We've got those folks who might show up in our stories. And I want you to think about them. Who are the regular, usual suspects that are showing up in your story? But then I want you to think about 3 very specific lenses. The first one is partners. Partners, right? These could be friends. These could be family members. These could be acquaintances. But do you have a couple people who are kind of like just the partners who show up, right? Partners who show up. The second role that I want you to think of are people who might be mentors in your life. And it doesn't mean that it had to be this official thing where you're like, hey, Kay Wilson, will you be my mentor? Right? It may have not looked like that in your story, right? But these are people, and let me give you an idea of how they might show up. This might be a person who shows up in your life in this kind of way. Hey, can I pick on you? You're right here. What's your name? Daria. Okay, so Daria is here in the building, y'all. So Daria, that might be, if I say, Daria, you definitely want to check out this book. Go read this book. Or there's this meeting. Make sure you attend the meeting. Majetta, there's this conference. You got to go attend that. It might look like that, right? A mentor might do that for you. Let's meet. We have coffee, something like that. I don't drink coffee, but, that's what the coffee drinkers do, right? They may show up that way. Then, I want you to think about sponsors. Sponsors is a completely different thing. And unfortunately, a lot of people who have grown up with some kind of identity lens that has been marginalized or disenfranchised in some way, we're not really always familiar with the people who show up as sponsors, because this would change our lives. Here's what a sponsor does. A sponsor doesn't say, go read the book. A sponsor says, I'm writing a book, and I'd like you to help be a contributing author. I want to write this chapter with you. A sponsor says, I'm going to the conference, and I want you to co-present with me, right? A sponsor says, I'm at this power meeting that you may not have access to get invited to, but when I went to the meeting, I brought up your name. I talked about you in the meeting, right? A mentor says good things to your face. A sponsor says good things while you're not even there, right? A sponsor creates the access for us. Now, I'm thinking for a second about community, thinking about power building. Who are the people in your life who have been able to give you access to more power? Who are the people who were able to put you in a room you couldn't be put in by yourself? Who are the people who introduced you to somebody else? And that introduction was significant, or if you didn't have it. Who are the people who gave you some advice and they really put you on some game that helped you out? Like, who's that first person who was like, yo, you're going to want to go ahead and file them taxes, right? Or you might want to actually get a bank account, right? Cashing that out, in the spot in the neighborhood, that might not be the way to go. Who is putting you on to information that's going to help you pivot in a different way? Partners, mentors, sponsors. This is pretty significant. So now let's move into some deeper questions about how we're thinking about the people who are showing up in our lives. Here's the first one. This is where it starts getting super sensitive. Who did you need? And thinking about the experiences, particularly the ones that we started with in the center of your story. Remember that stuff? The stuff we don't always talk about? The stuff that we survive when we tell our success story, but we don't always tell our survival story? In the center, when you think about those experiences, who did you need? Who did you need to get through them? Now, here's how I really want you to think about this when we go a little bit deeper. Not just who you needed and they showed up, right? Because we have those names. But there are also people who we needed and maybe they didn't show up. I also want you to think about that. Who did you need and they didn't show up or they weren't there? Or who did you need and they did show up? And even to think about that, let's give some air to that a little bit. What did you need? What did you need? If they showed up and you're like, I definitely needed them, and they showed up, when they showed up, what did they provide you? Were you needing comfort and you got it? Were you needing comfort and you didn't get it? Were you needing advice, wise counsel? Did you get it? Were you needing support, resources, services? Did you get what you needed? Who did you need when you were going through those moments, those times, those difficult times? Did you go through something heavy and you needed to grieve and you needed a spiritual advisor? Who showed up in your story? Were any of the people, some of the people we talked about in our usual suspects box, the partners, mentors, sponsors? You might be a repeating name that shows up, maybe or maybe not. If it's not a specific name, maybe it was a role. Maybe there was a specific role, like I'm talking about mentor sponsors. Maybe you're thinking, Kim, I didn't have one. Maybe the person you needed was a mentor, right? So maybe you write down the role. Maybe you went through a serious health condition and you needed a really good doctor. Did you have one? Did you not have one? Who did you need? Who did you need in your story? Who did you need? Please note too, this is past tense. Past tense. Who did you need? So I want to let that breathe for a second. This is usually where people are like, I don't like this exercise. I'm leaving, right? And I've done this with young people. I've done this with older people. This is why, so when people are like, I don't feel it, anybody can do this, and I'm going to tell you why I know. Just a quick little story. When my oldest daughter was about to go to college, it was right when she was like summer, she's about to go, and she was a 17-year-old college freshman. So I want y'all to think about where you were in your mindset at 17. You remember 17? Does anyone think they were mature at 17? Do you think you were mature at 17? Were you mature at 17? I was a hot mess at 17, right? So 17, she's about to go to college. And we do this mapping session that we're doing right now with her. Because I'm like, I want you to really think about your story as you're beginning this next chapter. And this baby at 17 did this mapping session. And when I tell y'all, I had this moment as a mother where I'm like, I am so proud of you. That was so powerful. She said some stuff where I don't know if I would have been mature enough to do it. So that said, anybody can do this. I know it. I know it because I've walked through it. All right, who did you need? I'll give y'all some stuff later on about some of the things she said in here. I just want to put that teaser out there. Okay, so the next one is present tense. Who do you need right now? Remember, the third thing I asked you was, what's the battle that's coming, or the battles that are coming? You know some other stuff is coming. I already survived this. I made it through this stuff. That was our first question. Then our next one was, here's some victories that I had. I conquered these things. These are some wins. The third question was, what's coming? So based on what's coming, who do you need? If you lining up the team, who do you need? Any of y'all remember when you used to go out to the club? No, just me, just me. Listen, you remember when you were about to go to the club, you didn't really be like, I'm gonna go to the club by myself. You assembled the team, right? And if you're really good about it, when you assemble the team, everybody has a role. Okay, you don't drink. That was always my role. You don't drink, Kim, so you have to make sure that whoever came in the car leaves in the car. Figuratively. We'll see, right? Everybody's got a role. This one is going to be the wingman. You just know your role on today, right? Everyone has a role. We needed somebody. If you could assemble a team to go out to the club, surely when you're talking about building your story, building power for yourself, you can assemble your team. Well, who's your team? Who do you need for the next thing that you're about to do? You're trying to do something, even if it's a little bit. Who do you need to be healthy? Who do you need to be healed? Who do you need to be whole? Who do you need to make a difference in your 10-block radius of your house? Who do you need? People? Are there specific roles in community? For what you need to get done in your specific story, who do you need? All right. The next one, we push a little bit deeper. Who needs you? Somebody needs you. You're very significant in somebody's life. This also gets sensitive too, because some of us, when we have these kinds of stories, we're like, I'm just out here. We might feel invisible sometimes, and I see you. There's a word, sawubona, means I see you. I see you if you ever have that feeling, of feeling like nobody even knows I'm out here. You are here. You are not invisible. Somebody needs you. We need you. I need you, right? Who needs you? Here's how I want you to think deeply about this one. How would you know, right? In fact, let's go to this. How do you know you're needed? I want you to think about these two questions together. If somebody needs you, who might that be? Who might that be? Is it the younger version of you? As we get older, do you ever see somebody and they remind you of you? In a younger version, you're like, ooh, if I would have found me at 17 or 8 or 12, what would I say? What would I do? How could I show up for them? Who needs you, and how do you know you're needed? What is it that you are sensing when you are in the room that you do when you're in the room? That somebody needs you, somebody needs your power, somebody needs your story. They need your experience in that room to change the room, right? Majetta, when you're in a room, you know that there's something you're going to bring in the room, right? That's going to change the room. I know your story, so I'm picking on you, right? But that means then somebody needs you. Can you identify who needs you? Can you identify how you know that you're needed? Sometimes there's weird ways that we know we're needed. You ever have friends who are always calling you for advice? They need you. You ever have people who, when you give them advice, they never take your advice? They need you. You ever have people who you're like, this person can't stand my guts, and yet I find them often in my business? Maybe they need you. Maybe they need some of that light that they keep pulling from, right? People need us. How do we know we're needed? Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not so obvious. What if the way that you know you're needed is because there's certain kinds of topics that happen in community, and when that topic comes up, it just stirs you in a certain kind of way, right? I know when I hear this intersectionality of like race and mental health, I know that's a space where I'm needed, because I grew up with a parent who had bipolar disorder. So I know when that topic comes up, it stirs something in me. I know I'm needed in that space. What are the issues that make you wake up early, make you not be able to sleep at night? That might let you know who needs you. Who needs you? What's speaking to you to let you know that you're needed? Who needs you, and how do you know? How do you know you're needed? So these last questions that we had are very specific to the human beings in our stories, the human beings that we're connected to. And it's important for us to remember, we are not about here on our own. You are connected to other people. The people that you don't like, you're connected to them. The people that you do like, you're connected to them. The people who you forgot about, you're connected to them. The people who need to know you, you're connected to them. You got some people in community right now, maybe sitting in traditional leadership roles, and they're sleeping on you, figuratively or maybe literally, because they don't realize how powerful you are. They need you. They don't even know yet. So this is part of why we do this too. Because if you know your story, when you get into these spaces, you get in front of somebody, you know how to show people, like, listen, you might not know you need me, but you do, and here's why, right? So that's how we get very familiar with our story, how to tell our story, how to tell this part of our story in the right way, in the right time, in the right moment, so we can catalyze all that power in a space and make sure that it improves conditions, not just for me, but for everybody around me. All right. Last two questions, and this is super important. Sometimes when we are in the position of either limitation, or if we're in the position of giving all the time, or hopefully not, but oftentimes it does happen, deficit model thinking, we don't think that we're going to receive anything. We're like, I'm just giving out. There's nothing that comes back to me. So when this question is sitting in front of you that I'm asking you right now, and the question is, if you could ask for anything and believe that you would receive it, what would you ask for? But here's the challenge with this one. If you go into answering this question with limitation, thinking that you're small, thinking you have deficit model thinking, you are going to shrink your answer to this question. I need you to think that there is no limitation, there is no ceiling, there's no floor. There's nothing that is outside of the realm of possibility with whatever your answer might be to this question. If you would ask for something and believe without a shadow of a doubt in your mind that you would receive the thing that you were asking for, what would you ask for? And believe you were going to receive it. And then here are two different ways I want you to think about that. One version might be very, very corporeal. Maybe it's just like that car. I want that car. I want them shoes. I want the house. I want the land. You know, maybe it's those things. I want the job. It might be those things, right? Very tangible things. It might be those things that you ask for, and that's okay. And I also want you to think about abstract things that you might ask for. Do you want restorative justice in your community? Do you want peace? Do you want every household to have equitable access to food and housing? Do you need healing from trauma? Do you need to feel that you have a spiritual purpose? There's meaning to your life? What would you ask for if you believed there would be no limitation for you to receive that thing that you ask for? This is critically important. Let's think about this from a community building lens for a second. You might be watching out there. Maybe you're present in this room. Maybe you see this clip somewhere else. I'm not sure. Maybe you have a conversation about it. When people are open to advocacy, activism, organizing, power building, whatever your work might be in community, in many cases, we are talking about building something we have never seen before. Want to build this neighborhood that's holistically safe and well. You have never actually seen that. So how do you build something you've never seen? Make sure every family in the zip code has what they need. Have you seen that before? In a neighborhood where everybody looks like a BIPOC space, Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Have you seen zip codes where historically it was disenfranchised and then they got everything that they've had? If you've never seen that before, but that's what you're fighting for, how do you build something you've never seen? How do you do it? Well, this is one of the ways. You have to be able to dream in a way where there are no limitations. And we have to be healthy. Sometimes we're trying to build healthy things and we're sick. And we got to be really honest about that. If you're not healed from your own trauma and you're trying to build a resilient community, but you're not well, how do you do that? How do you build a community with no resentment when you have resentment? How do you build a community that has beautiful restorative justice and you haven't quite worked out conflict resolution in your own story? Abstractly, what do you ask for? So that we are used to receiving when we want to give this to others in community. So what if you're the community leader and you're talking about something big you want to do and the people don't believe it? I'm trying to give you something, and I need you to believe that this thing that we're trying to do and build, the thing I want to give to you, is possible, right? So, thinking big, what would you ask for if you believed that you could receive it? If you believed you could receive it, what would you ask for? And then here's the last question. Here's the last question. If all of the elements of the last 9 questions were so, and we were able to process and power through all of the last 9 questions, then this is the last one. What must I give and what must I do? So if my second to last question was, I'm going to receive some stuff, now I'm repositioning myself as a different kind of giver in this question. Because this is an asset-based thinker, an asset-based giver. I've got everything that I need. I'm good, I'm solid, I'm secure, I'm fully connected, I'm resilient, I understand my purpose, and so now I can give back in a way where my repository is full. I have plenty that I can give to other people without losing anything. So if that is so, and if all of my needs are met, what must I give and what must I do? So let me go back to my daughter that I was talking about. When I got to this question, this is what surprised me about what she wrote down. So remember, 17, she is like a very whimsical kind of child, very dramatic. Okay, this is the girl who will get a paper cut and literally fall out on the floor and be like, I think I'm dying. She dies 14 times a day, right? She's like, oh my God, I almost died. Again? I thought you almost died this morning, right? Very, very dramatic. We get to this question, and my beloved answers the question this way. She said, okay, what must I give? What must I give? She said, you know, if I'm being completely honest with myself, my body has changed multiple times in the last several years, and I've got all these beautiful dresses from homecomings and dances that I'm just like storing for what reason? I need to give these dresses away. There's some girl out there who didn't have life as fortunate as me to have some of these beautiful dresses that I'm not going to do anything with. Why am I holding on to them? I need to give these dresses and some of these clothes and shoes and stuff away. Let me give this stuff away. What must I give? I need to give this stuff away. And then what must I do? And then this is where, if mommy's had peacock feathers, all of my peacock feathers came out, and I levitated for like 13 seconds. It was beautiful. What must I do? My daughter says, you know what? I hold grudges. I know that I hold grudges. And I have some relationships that I need to repair. I need to seek atonement. She used the word atonement. I need to seek atonement for these relationships that I have not released the blessing of forgiveness on, right? That's what I must do. I must give away these items, and I must seek atonement. So in thinking about that, that was a 17-year-old, right? For you, out there, in the room, whoever, in the universe, what must you give and what must you do? And again, let's think about this as it relates to community, as it relates to building power, as it relates to connecting our stories to the greater good. There's something that you have already lived through. You already cracked the code on something in your own story. Based on what your story has shown you, what do you have to give to others? And what does that require of you to do for others based on your story? What must you give? What must you do? All right, so these are the 10 questions that we asked. You may not be able to see the font, and that's okay. That's fine. But I wanted you to see them all together, because what we have now is a map of what your story looks like. These are my experiences that I've been through. These are the people who are showing up, the characters that are showing up in my story. This is how I've made meaning of the people who are showing up in my story, right? How I developed relationship, how I developed connection or not, how I felt about these relationships or not. And then we started talking about based on these experiences, the sum total of all these things, what is now being asked of me? What do I need to give? How do I need to serve? What's the next chapter in the story? That's where we are now. Okay, so here's what I want us to know, that I need you to know that you know that you know. Your story, and especially the pain points in your story, are actually the most powerful parts of your story. So, quick metaphor. There's a kind of art in Japanese art called Kinsugi. Kinsugi, right? And in this kind of art, say you have a porcelain teacup or something like that, or a ceramic teacup. If the teacup breaks here, we're like, oh, the cup broke. We throw the cup away. In Kinsugi, when it breaks, the break is sealed with gold. So then the break becomes the most valuable part of the item. You highlight the break because now it makes it unique, it makes it significant, it makes it more valuable than it was before the break. What if our stories are really just showing us that we are Kinsugi? What is it in your story that needs to be highlighted to say, this is actually when my superpower was activated, and here's how my superpower is going to make my life better and the lives of everybody that I touch in this energy exchange that we call the human experience. What's the Kinsugi in your life? What's the Kinsugi in your story? So a couple examples that I wanted to give you are this. If you have been hungry before, and not like I didn't eat lunch hungry, okay? But if you've been really, really hungry before, where you didn't know where the next meal was coming, and you survived that experience, wouldn't you be the most powerful person in the room to be able to develop a plan for a food pantry? Wouldn't you know how to do that better than anyone else? Or maybe you're like, no, it's not a food pantry. This is how you fix it. Because you knew what it was like. You lived that story. You survived it. So when we talk about food deserts in the communities, why are we going to people who've never been hungry before? You have the power in that story. That's yours. That's yours to lead. For a person who has survived abuse and who knows what it feels like in your spirit to feel unsafe, not just your body, but in your spirit to feel unsafe, and you survived that thing, and you are now in a place in your life where you can talk about it without the fear still conquering your body and your mind and your spirit, wouldn't you be the most powerful person to develop safety plans? Wouldn't it be you? Because you know what fear feels like. So you're the most powerful person in that story, not someone who's never experienced it, you. You would change your neighborhood based on your story. Trauma survivors might be the most powerful activists and advocates because you know what it feels like to have felt powerless, to have felt dysregulated and ungrounded. So when you get that back, you want to give that power to other people. You want to make that contagious to make sure I don't want to hoard this gift. Somebody else has to get this thing, right? How do I do it? You're going to be the most powerful person to figure out how to make people get that. A child or a person who grew up with a learning disability, you're the best teacher. You're the best teacher. Why? Because you already had to differentiate the learning. You already had to figure out how to do multiplication, how to figure out the reading, how to figure out all that stuff. You already did it. Already did it. Best teachers, people with learning disabilities. And restored citizens are formerly incarcerated, our justice-involved friends. When you come out and you recreate your story, and I have a special heart space for this, I do a lot of advocacy regarding restored citizens. When you come back out and you've made a conscious decision to change your life, wouldn't you know how to best bring together community, right? One of my friends used to be like a terror in the neighborhood, and now they're a peacemaker. Wouldn't they know how to make peace the best, right? That's my subject matter expertise. I know how to do that. What's your story? What is your story telling you? What part of your story have you tried to maybe distance yourself from that's actually the thing you need to run toward, that is really going to liberate people, where there's so much power in it, and that's where we build the power. the people and the places and the things around you, the experiences that you've had. That's what this is about. I wanted to find out, I know we have a little bit of time left. There's questions or comments or concerns, shout outs, grievances. And I'll say this too. When I've done this exercise with people, the thing that I notice when people really sit still and look at what they've mapped is there's patterns in your story. One of the things that came up in my daughter's story, just as an example that I'll share, is she noticed that there were certain people in her life who were absent that she wanted there. I wanted that person there and they weren't. And this experience would have been more helpful if that person was there. But one of the things we found in her story is she has a gift for lost souls. She just knows how to find lost souls. She attracts them, and she makes people who feel dejected feel like they don't belong. She makes them feel like they belong. Why? Because that was her story. And she has this beautiful way of finding people and placing them into her story as surrogates for the roles that were missing. If we hadn't mapped it, she wouldn't have known that that was part of her story. So this is a unique way that she's going to be able to serve community that's tied to her story. What's in your story? Any questions? Comments? Yes?
Feel like to move.
So the question was about if you are feeling imposter syndrome, how do you move through or past that to be able to actualize some of the beauty that's in your story, right? I think we have, when we're moving, when we're navigating, transitioning from certain moments in our stories, we sometimes, especially if you come from any identity that was disenfranchised in some kind of way, one of the things we struggle with is feeling like we have to do above and beyond to be worthy of the new space, right? Well, I can't because, so the first thing I would say to this is, you were worthy when you woke up. You were valuable because you breathe air in your body, period, right? So you're worthy, period. There's no extra stuff that needs to go beyond the sentence. But the second thing is, we have to somehow disconnect believing that our value in a space only comes from the increasing amount of productivity, right? Only because I do these things, because sometimes the imposter syndrome is, well, I'm not supposed to be here, so I either need to be quiet or shrink myself, or I need to do more that shows I'm worthy of being in the space. And so what if that's not true? But that comes with the healthier part of this work. You know, it's saying like, you got to be actually good with your story. You have to be good with your story and knowing these are all the components of my story, good, bad, and indifferent. These are how all the puzzle pieces fit together. And because of this makes me worthy of being in this space. That I'm grounded in something solid, and I'm not trying to take a room that's not mine. That's the other part, too, I think, for imposter syndrome, is believing that my story gave me a specific role. I'm not supposed to do what Kay Wilson does, right? I'm supposed to do what Kim Brazwell does. And as long as I stick to what I'm supposed to do, I have purpose in that, and how could I be an imposter in my own story? Because I'm not trying to do something that is ulterior to what my purpose was. But that requires me, again, know your story and understand your purpose. And don't veer from it. And know that if you've completed 2 less or 5 more things in the day, none of that qualified or disqualified you from taking up space in the planet. None of it. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's how I would answer the question. I don't know how much more time we have. How did I find the motivation to create and complete the map? Yes. Okay, so my answer to this is my area, my passion is trauma-informed social justice, which is really the heart of what this map is. And When I started in my earlier career, I was doing diversity and inclusion work, but when I believed that it shouldn't be calendar events, that I should really respond to the people that I was serving. What do you actually want to do? Like, we can do this festival, but what's your story, and what do you want to do? So I make sure I'm responding, right? From a programmatic perspective, one might look at it as like, I need to make sure people attend, so what would you attend? But when I was talking with people, they had real needs and real stories. So why would I plan this festival when what we really need is meals and mentors or different things like that? Let me respond to what's actually happening in your life. When I did it that way, I realized I wasn't doing diversity work, I was doing social justice work, which means it had to include people's stories. Then the second part was the trauma and resilience part. When you actually create spaces or desire to create spaces that are safer and braver and more courageous for people to feel like they can show up and tell you what their real story is, not the story that I'm just posing in the space, not imposter syndrome, not the thing I want you to hear, but my real story, then what I realized is I have to make sure that I honor everything that has been part of your story that hurt. Everything. Because I might create something really great now, but it doesn't fix the things that hurt you before you got into the space, right? And so I have to make sure that I honor every part of your story, including the pain parts. That's why this map starts with the pain, right? Because it's like, we thought that didn't have value. But what I found is if you base everything on the good thing that came from the pain, all of your power came from that. So we start there, and everything that comes to there, we can show beauty, a rose from concrete, right? All the good stuff from it. So that's where this purpose mapping came from. And that's how I kind of morph it into spaces, and whether I'm working with elders, young people, it's amazing when you ask people to really sit down and think about their story, what hurt and what they're passionate about and what they believe might even slightly be possible, you know, what can be birthed in a space. And then if you connect that to other people's stories, like we could really change the world. We really, really can. One human being, one interaction, one neighbor, and one neighborhood at a time. It's possible. We just have to believe that we're worthy. We have to believe that I can put the ask out there and I'll receive the thing. We have to manifest the good work, and then we have to be willing to do the good work and be vulnerable enough to know that our story is the unleashing of the power in those spaces. Yay, we're good? All right. Thank you.
How they can reach you, so if we have additional questions, they can shoot them to you and maybe you guys can connect.
Sure, I think the quickest and the easiest way would be able to find me on social media. There's no mystery there, so on Facebook, I'm just Kimberly Brazwell. And on Instagram, I'm K Brazwell. My Brazwell is spelled with a Z, so it's KBrazwell. And I do have a link tree. If you're on Linktree, it's KiMISTRY. My consulting firm is called KiMISTRY. It's KIMISTRY. I have an LLC. But yeah, please reach out. I try to make myself as accessible as possible because I just really believe that all the power is really in the people. Grateful to be here. Thank you to Impact. Thank you to Kay. Thank you to you out there. Maybe it's 2 of you, maybe it's 12. I don't know who's going to see this, but I'm so grateful for you for sharing your time with us today. Know that you have power.